Hello, we are pleased to welcome you to this new Berta-style video. Today, we will show you how to make model 4B from the cover of the Berta Easy Magazine number 2 from March-April 2022. Let's find out how to sew this wonderful blouse. It is easy for both beginners and experienced makers. Simple pieces end up being classics. And with a V neckline and elastic at the cuffs, this blouse is a timeless addition to any wardrobe. It can be sewn in a variety of fabrics, and everyone who makes it can find their own style. To give our blouse a luxurious touch, we decided to make it from Sollard-colored silk. You can find the fabric on the website of our partner C. Pauli, the specialist for GOTS certified fabrics. With regard to sewing supplies, you will need needles for the sewing machine, thread that matches your fabric, straight pins, a needle for sewing by hand, a safety pin, fabric scissors, a tape measure, tailor's chalk or a chalk pencil, a ruler, a tracing wheel, Berta-style tracing paper, elastic, and interfacing. We recommend a Microtex needle for your sewing machine if you have selected a fine, delicate fabric such as silk. Remember to take your measurements and compare them to the ones in the size chart in your magazine. They will enable you to find the right size for your pattern. Transfer pattern pieces 1 to 5 from pattern sheet 1 and position them on the fabric according to the cutting layout. Transfer the pattern outlines and then add the seam allowances that are listed in the sewing instructions for the model, plus all the lines and notches required. Draw pattern piece B directly on the fabric according to the measurements listed in the table in the magazine. To transfer the markings and seam lines to the opposite side of the fabric, I use the tracing wheel and tracing paper. Before I remove the straight pins from the pieces I've cut out, I carefully place the paper underneath the fabric and roll the tracing wheel along the pattern piece edges and along the lines and notches. Cut out the interfacing for pattern pieces 3 and 4 and iron them onto the pattern pieces. For the seams, I use the Experience 570A sewing machine from Elna, and to neaten the edges, I use the Elna Extend 864 Air Overlock machine. I start with the bust darts. I fold the front piece so that the dart lines meet and pin them. I stitch the line to the point and press the darts towards the hem. Now, I continue with the shoulders and facings of the blouse. I neaten the shoulder allowances and place the front piece and the back piece right sides together. I pin the shoulder seams and stitch them along seam 1. I now place the shoulders of the facings together, pin them, and stitch along seam 2. I place the seams of the blouse and facings apart and neaten the outer edge of the facing. Now on to the neckline. I place the facing on the neckline, right sides together, making sure the shoulder seams meet. I pin the allowances and stitch them together. I trim the allowances, clip the curves, and also trim the allowance at the center front point up to the seam. I press the facing to the inside and attach to the shoulder seam with a few stitches by hand. Next step, the side seams. I neaten the side edges of the back and front pieces. I place the front piece on the back piece, right sides together, pin the allowances and stitch them along seam 3. I secure the seam ends by backstitching here and press the seams apart now. I continue with the hem. I neaten it and press it to the inside. I pin it and top stitch it 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Now on to the sleeves. I lengthen my sewing machine stitch to 4 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch and make 2 parallel lines of stitching between the dots that are marked on the sleeve head. I leave the threads long as I will use them to gather the sleeve head later. I neaten the sleeve allowances and fold them in half, the wrong side of the fabric face up, and stitch the sleeve along seam 4. I press the seams apart. Now I continue with the elastic at the cuffs. I fold the cuffs in half lengthwise, right sides together, stitch the short sides to the center, and secure the seam ends. I press the allowances apart up to the allowances that have not been stitched. I fold the cuff in half lengthwise, wrong sides together. I pin the open edge of the cuff to the lower sleeve edge, right sides together, making sure the seams meet and that the opening in the cuff sleeve is on top. I stitch the edges, neaten the allowances, and press the seam into the sleeve. Now I cut the elastic in half, attach the safety pin to one end, and pull it through the opening in the seam of the cuff. I stitch the two ends of the elastic together and close the opening in the cuff seam by hand. And now I finish by setting in the sleeve. I pull the bobbin threads of the two lines of stitching evenly at the same time to gather the sleeve head and pin the sleeve to the armhole right sides together. The sleeve seam and side seam of the blouse meet, and notch 5 on the sleeve and the armhole match. I stitch the sleeve into the armhole. I neaten the seam allowances together and press the seam into the sleeve. This attractive blouse is now finished. It is time to make a few, as the model is very easy. It was designed for Berta sizes 34 to 44, like all our easy models. Do not forget to watch the second tutorial from this magazine. Don't forget to tell us about your creations and exchange with other makers on our social networks. I look forward to seeing you in the near future when I show you other models. Berta Style says thank you and recommends our partners Elna and C. Polly. Thanks, and see you soon with new Berta Style tutorials.